Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Christian Douglas from Christian Douglas Design and Backyard Farm Co. Christian was born and raised in the UK and had a business there for 10 years where he went to the Chelsea Flower Show during that time. And then 12 years ago, moved to California, where he's been based and started working more on permaculture and permaculture principles. And he's just released a new book, which I was pretty excited to receive a copy of. And I'm also going to be doing my first giveaway for the podcast that we've ever done. So that's also pretty exciting. But absolutely loved reading his book. I don't know what I would have said if I had got a book off someone and it was horrific and I hated it and then had him on the podcast. But luckily, that wasn't the case. It was such a good book, and it's got me. Like, I've never been that big into the permaculture side of things or growing your own food, but after reading it and sort of the way he goes about doing things in it, it's certainly I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more of it, and not only doing a lot more of it at home, but incorporating it into designs and projects in the future. So, yeah, I highly recommend getting a copy of the book, whether you like that side of things or not. It's just like it looks awesome. It's great ideas in there. So, yeah, it was just a great experience to not only get the book but also talk to Christian as well, who is awesome person to talk to. And the giveaway that I'm doing is purely for podcast/YouTube listeners, so there won't be any mention of it on Instagram or anything. So only people who listen to at least the start of the episode, at least to get this far in. But because Christian was generous enough to give me a copy of the book, I decided to return the favour and buy 3 copies and send them out to 3 listeners. So if you don't want me to know your address or PO box, you'll have to refrain from entering the competition. But all you have to do to enter this competition, and I'll leave it running for 2 weeks from the date of release. So it's getting released on the 11th of November. So it'll run until the 25th of November. But I'll do a post of Christian on my Instagram page at install_gardens. And all you have to do is share that to your stories, and then you'll go into the draw. And just tag me in it just in case I don't see a copy of it. And if I don't like it, it means I haven't seen it. So feel free to send me a message saying that you've done it. But that's it. All you have to do that, and then I'll do some sort of randomizer to pick 3 and then send them off. And it can be, as far as I know, anywhere in the world, because I'll just be buying it from the local bookstore online. But the book is called The Food Forward Garden, and Christian Douglas is the author. And as I said, awesome person to talk to. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Christian Douglas. Well, Christian, thank you for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
Yes, pleased to be here. Thanks for having me on, Joel. I trained in horticulture and design in England in my late teens, and ended up working for a landscape architecture and design firm in the South. We grew a business there, myself and 2 business partners, which are still going today, successful sort of just classical landscape design, English country house, cottage type thing. And I worked there for over a decade, and then I left and I went off and started studying regenerative agriculture, permaculture, all of those things. I actually came to Australia, studied with Jeff Lawton up in the hinterlands, with the Byron hinterland up there on his farm. It's a tuna farm. And then I just carried on going off around the world, getting into desert climates and environments, working with the Permaculture Research Institute of Australia. Actually, they had a farm in Jordan, and they went off and started developing that farm. We ran natural building classes and permaculture classes for various internationals and locals. And then from there, I ended up coming to California and started a business which was permaculture in spirit, but customer facing. It was a little bit more conventional landscape. So I ended up just starting the Backyard Farm Company. And we just really focused on landscape design and teaching people how to grow food. So we kept it very, very simple. We felt that was more effective. And then we grew that business, and then separated off into an education business that now has online classes, mentoring, in person, online. And then we have the second landscape architecture company, Christian Douglas Design, which just focuses purely on plans and working with architects, developers, homeowners. We're working in hospitality for some wineries now too, all through the lens of growing food in an ornamental landscape.
So what made you want to get into landscape design or horticulture when you were a teenager?
Back in the day,
Yeah.
I just like being outdoors. I wasn't good in classroom settings. I like just being outdoors, and I was definitely a creative, and I knew that I had to lean into that side of who I was. I wasn't drawn to academia, and I just got into gardens, and I took this 3 year class and just loved it. And I was able to work on weekends, growing just personal stuff on the weekends, and then also joining the company. And I just loved it. It was just good to move your body, be outdoors every day, and then also just work in these beautiful, wonderful places, particularly in England. We worked in a really beautiful part of the country, so where people really honored and kind of respected landscape design and were willing to kind of invest in those improvements to their homes. So it made it fun, and we got to just work on great, interesting historic projects, and yeah, it was just easy to fall in love with it at that point.
And so that crew, that partnership you were with for 10 years, is that where you went to the Chelsea Flower Show?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did Chelsea a few times. In fact, my business partners, they're still going. They still occasionally do it. Yeah, we were working with Alitex, who do those beautiful Victorian greenhouses, and we would work together on designing and developing gardens, landscapes for them. So we did that. I did that twice, and then once with college, so 3 times total. It was an amazing experience, incredibly stressful,
Yeah.
but luckily I had a good team, so it made it easier. But
And a lot of
yeah.
people I've spoken to have done it more than once, so they certainly learnt a lot for the second time after the first time doing it.
Oh my gosh, for sure. Well, it's just logistically just a disaster, and then it rains in May, and you're just screwed. We got lucky, actually. I don't think we dealt with a lot of like intense rain, but I know some of these guys in the really big gardens just get it's just incredibly stressful. But it's worth it in the end, of course. And there's great camaraderie between all the different pitchers and people that have their gardens and the sellers, and just I don't know, it's just such a great festive week in London. And just everyone loves it. It's great. I'd love to go back actually. I haven't been back for a long time, but I'd love that.
Yeah, so what was the name of the company that you were with originally?
They're called Taylor Tripp. They changed their name, but they're called Taylor Tripp. And so yeah, Nick Tripp and Richard Taylor were my former business partners. So they're still working on these, I mean, magnificent estates all over, actually through Europe now, a lot in south of England, Ireland, of course, through London townhouses too. But again, very like the classical English traditional style. So you'll see that in some of our work in the book, actually, you'll see in some of the projects a little bit of that English came through, which is how I started here. We were kind of known for that a little bit. So in the book, it does cover some slightly more traditional looking landscapes, and then there's also some nice options for more wild, native, kind of California regional landscapes too. So we were trying to just offer just examples of how it can be done through different architectural vernaculars, and it can, and that was more for us just to experiment to see if it could and how it could, and hopefully that kind of comes across in some of the projects we feature.
And how was that after being with them to go out to make the decision to head off overseas? Had you been
Oh,
thinking
that
about it
was
for a
easy.
while?
That was easy. I've always been hyper curious. I've always traveled, and I was still, even when I was working there, I'd still head off for a month in the winter in January and go off to wherever, normally Asia, actually Australia. And I would go off and just exploring just different bioregions. So it was quite natural for me to head off. I think they were surprised because our business was doing so well, but I just there was something I felt that there was more to learn. And there was just something else. And I didn't know what it was actually until I met someone hiking in the Himalayas that told me about permaculture and got me into it. And I came over to Oregon actually and just did a class in the US. And from there I ended up back in Australia. I mean, then just moving all over the world, just studying with different experts and leaders in their fields of this type of systems design. And naturally, there's a lot of that going on in Oz. So
Now, what do you, like? I hear permaculture a lot, but what is it other than growing your own food?
yeah, it's a lot more than that. Well, it's system design really. So it's looking at whole landscapes or whole, not even just landscapes. Actually, it's looking at whole social systems, financial systems, how we live, how we support ourselves in a more regenerative manner. So less extractive techniques. So thinking more long term. A lot of the wisdom has kind of come from indigenous cultures for thousands of years around the world, where just that belief in that respect of particularly the landscape, is just honored in a different way. And I think what are the three main principles? It's care of the earth, care of people, and then returning the surplus to the first two. So a lot of it is about sharing resources and supporting each other. So it's a really wonderful design system that was obviously, I think, done near you, wasn't it? Wasn't it? It was David Holgram. I think he was Melbourne, studied with Bill Mollison, his professor, and they came up with a manual. And and then that's kind of rippled out all through the world. So it's a good place to start. And I think there's some great takeaways from that way of thinking about how we live. And what we've chosen to do is just pick some of those pieces, and then integrate it within a more of a prevailing culture or understanding of the kind of mainstream. And we just decided that food was the one place that we could do that, that everyone could get on board with. So rather than getting too heady with high level concepts, we just stuck with something really tangible and easy to understand.
And that's the most fun part as well, is having the
I
food.
think it is. Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think when you start to add in lots of layers, it gets confusing for people. I mean, I like to nerd out on it because I just personally enjoy it and I think it's important, but it's not for everyone. However, if we can just people, we have to start somewhere. And so I think some of these little gateways, like the simple act of growing food, is yeah, just a good place to start for a lot of people, to get them thinking differently and just thinking differently about all of the time, energy, and resources they use in their landscapes, and they could be getting something else in return of high value.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the gateway drug to it to get people into it because then once they start growing their own food, then they might have excess, so then they'll start the compost heap, and then you realize how much good the
Absolutely.
compost is for the garden, and it just keeps growing on from there.
You're right, because then people start thinking about soil, or they read an article about soil biology, and then that's a whole incredible universe. And then and then all of a sudden you're right. You're now thinking about living soil, and now you're thinking about compost and waste streams. You're also thinking about sharing that produce with your next door neighbor, and now all of a sudden they're going to start growing something, and we're now talking about that, and it becomes part of the kind of regular dialogue. And it can be something as simple as a fruit tree. It doesn't, we try and impress a bit in the book. It doesn't, we're not talking about production scale. We are not in the business of trying to grow as much food as possible on one site, but we're just looking for more people to start growing something. Um, and if that can scale, then I think the advantage or the benefits for all of us and the environment are huge.
Yeah, and one of the things, like when you're talking about sharing with your neighbors, one of the things I loved in your book was how there was a section where you were showing how to present, like how you can bundle food together to present to
Yeah.
someone, whether it's like a bouquet, like wrapped up
Yes.
with the foliage, and
That's right.
then like with herbs, you got the wreaths as well. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was probably my favorite part of the
Was
book,
it? That's
how
so
you net.
interesting. I actually like that part too, but that's interesting that you picked up on that. Yeah, we had to push to get that put in the book actually. So, and I'm pleased that that called to you, because we take it all the way through from kind of like the design details of growing food all the way through to presentation and how we kind of honor it at the other end. So yeah, creating a bouquet out of vegetables and fruits, and when you're gifting it to a family member or friend or neighbor, it's just a really easy, low tech, inexpensive way to kind of gift someone something, right? Which goes a really long way. And
Yeah, just
so,
rather than rocking
um,
up with a box. So here you go.
yeah, which is also fine, but there's something kind of there's just something else in that gesture of making it a kind of prettier, I think is, yeah, just extra special. And we wanted to just kind of show that in the book, or with the garlic braids or the herb wreath. They're just really kind of fairly simple projects that you can do.
So how long had you been planning the book? Because I've been scrolling back through your Instagram and seen a couple of years ago there's photos that were included in it. So it seems like it's been planning for a while.
Yeah, it was we probably when we started the first outline for the book, it was about 3 years ago. But in earnest, we've probably been working on it for about 2.5 years. So we needed 2 full years of photography. Some of those photographs we'd actually already taken prior, but mostly we had reshot everything, and it took 2 summer seasons in order to capture every landscape. To photograph a semi-mature landscape after construction it takes a minimum of 2 years anyway. So by the time you built something, we had projects that have been built or were being built that were just fantastic that we couldn't feature in the book because we still needed another year or two for them to mature in. But yeah, it was a major undertaking. We had at least 24 photo shoots and then lots of micro shoots in between where a fig was ready to harvest, so we needed a picture of a fig for the book. So we had to like go out and shoot the fig or a persimmon or a Fuji apple or something. So it was like nonstop. It was just nonstop content creation. And then we had to compile all of that, of course, into and kind of winnow it down into 256 pages. So there was a lot of editing.
Yeah, well, the quality of the photos is amazing as well because I see some books come through and they always seem to be really dark, the photos that are in books.
Oh, the color.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah, thank
it's
you.
top quality working
Yeah,
with
the
yours.
publishers are great. They have an amazing team that do all the color corrections and work on all the color balancing. That was a huge undertaking that I had no idea existed until we wrote a book. So they did a great job.
So, did you have you had anyone guiding you through how to put it all together?
The book?
Yeah,
Well, we had an editor, so we worked with a really good publisher from New York, and then she held our hands throughout the whole thing. And then just working with their team as well. And then we had our team here. So we have Christiana, who also works here as our head farmer. She's an incredible writer. She also helped tremendously with the book. And then we also worked with a lady, Ellen, who also helped with some of the writing and kind of mentoring and kind of guidance, because it's incredibly complicated to organize it. When you read it at the end you're at now, it all feels just kind of put together and organized, but it takes a long time because you have so many different ideas and thoughts how it's going to look. So that's why you just work with a really smart team. And I think in the end, there was a lot of that going on, but in the end, it all came together and we feel really happy with the fact that we've included just enough of kind of everything. It couldn't be everything. It couldn't be a book on how to grow every single vegetable. It just wasn't enough pages. We just really wanted to express our principles of design and how we approach every single one of our landscape projects, which is slightly different from the normal.
yep, yeah. And one of the like the main thing I took away from it was the like you've got your 10 principles, and one of them is blending botanicals. So that's blending in
Mhm.
edibles with the normal landscape plants.
That's
And
right.
that's, yeah, I think that's the best way to do it because, and there are some plants that work really well, like blueberries, for example. Like they don't look like a vegetable or a fruit, like
Right.
they're not messy. So if you actually think about it, it works putting blending them in.
And then we often try to segregate them, and it's an error, I think, because there's no reason to. So yeah, we're big fans of foraging species like blueberries, strawberries, fruit trees. It doesn't have to be production crops. It doesn't have to be vegetables. Vegetables are definitely higher maintenance and need more touch, regular touch, whereas a lot of the other species, like our fruit species and berry species and herbs, really don't. And so there really isn't that many excuses to not start putting them in our landscapes. Other than predation, deer, rabbits. I mean, of course, we do have those concerns and issues, but there are still opportunities for us, especially in suburban areas where the pressure of those aren't as high.
Yeah, and also a lot of it seemed like there's a lot of tiered like retaining walls that you were using, maximizing to use for them, and having the strawberries blend over the top so that like they're
We
not
do
as
that a
easily
lot.
accessible as well.
It's easy, right? Because then your strawberries blend over the top, and then the birds can't eat them because they're hanging over the edge. It's harder for them to peck at.
Mm.
So there's even those little tips and tricks we've kind of learned over the years. And retaining walls. We're in hill country here, coastal California. So we have to do a lot of retaining walls. And so we just utilize those for growing food. Often people don't know what to do with their slopes. They might put ornamentals on there. But if we get to terrace them, then, when we're building walls now I have to go back to metric because I am imperial from having been metric, but, less than like 3/4 of a meter. I totally forgot how to do metric, but a waist high bed. A waist high wall is just the easiest height to harvest. It's like a kitchen countertop, right? A little bit lower. So it's ergonomically easier to kind of garden as well. So we really love gardening at around, a meter, just a little bit below that for ease of gardening. and also holding up hillsides. So it's a really nice way to maximize both things.
How long have you been in America for?
12 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
just got to say it. Forgetting 750 mil is
I know, 750 mil. And it's funny, isn't it? Because of course in England I was absolutely metric, and I came here and all the scale rulers were, and all the measurements were imperial, tape measures, everything. And so I don't know, in England though we would still have a three, I'm trying to remember, like a 3 meter 2x4. Like we'd still, all the old boys in the sawmills would still be talking about, you still mix the
yeah.
measurements, you'd still be a 2x4, a 3 meter. Whereas here it's 100% imperial. So yeah, I had to completely relearn, or not even relearn, but just learn a new measuring style. And now I've completely forgotten metric. So that's just how it is sometimes, isn't it?
I did see you're on a TV show in the States and talking about herbs, but you still pronounce the H in herb, whereas they
Oh,
don't seem to.
that one, I would be dragged across hot coals by my mother if I ever called it the other word with the E. Yeah, I've been told that's the one thing I'm never allowed to say in our family. So everything else I can get away with. But I do say basil now.
Right.
So, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got being English and the language is English, you've got a right to tell people if they're wrong, I think, when you're over there.
Thing is, if you start saying things like basil, people are like, "What do you mean?" Like they don't understand what you're saying. So then you have to repeat yourself, and then you have to, and then it's just easier sometimes just to lean in.
Yeah. I actually
But yeah,
heard in America they say liriope and we call it liriope, so I assumed they were wrong. And then I looked into the origins of it and it's a Greek goddess it's named after. And I thought, well, this she probably wasn't called liriope. There's a fair chance she was called liriope, and that's actually how you say it. So
it's true. They do say larapi, and it's funny. You call it what do you call it? Larope,
liriope.
and I call it liriope. So we all call it something different.
Yeah.
So that's it. I don't know who's who, but that's actually interesting about the historic origin of that name.
Yeah, I'm a bit nerdy like that as well. I like to look into
Yes.
how it came out, like
Yeah, that's great.
Clivius as well. People call them Clivius, but it was named
Clearly.
after Lady Clive. So
So then that's how we say it. That's good to know. You should do a
yeah,
whole show on that. You need to do a whole
yeah,
show on a proper
yeah,
etiquette of how to pronounce plants.
yeah. That's it's one of those things that can bother me a lot, like grammar. So
That's true. That's
easily
true.
easily annoyed. Have you got a favorite part of the book? Like, is it showing the gardens that you've built, like those first 8 projects, or is it
Mm,
teaching people how to
I
do
like
it?
the outliers. I like the second phase, which is talking about the outliers. I think those are sort of more challenging sites, or just more unconventional kind of opportunities and sites. I think it's because it just demonstrates more about just you can grow food kind of in challenging places as long as you have sunlight and access to water. And so I like that section of those four. They all feel quite different, and they're all situations that a lot of people find themselves into. Kind of wooded areas, tree areas, front gardens. Not everyone has a meadow, in fairness, but we're doing more and more meadow planting now. I don't know how it is in Oz, whether you guys are getting more into the grass matrix kind of landscaping, more naturalistic planting, but that was really fun to do. So yeah, I really liked that, and of course the rooftop too. That was a really fun project. So utilizing horizontal space on top of a carport for growing food out of the way of deer. So just really getting people to think more about opportunities and not just being like, well, I don't have this open space for a garden. Thinking, okay, well, could I X, Y, and Z? So um, yeah, I really like that section. That was my favorite.
Yeah, there's a lot of good products like wicking beds as well. Like you can just buy the pot and then you
Yeah,
can have it on a balcony or anywhere. But there's
that's
really
right.
nice use. But
Yeah,
like you
more
say,
like rooftops.
yeah, like you said, as long as you've got sunlight. And I did like that in the book where you mentioned if you've got 8 hours, you can have these plants, and 6 hours this, 4 to 6 this. But if you've got less than four, you said, well, you probably can't have anything. So there's no point telling people they can have it in any situation if they can't.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's just a couple of things you can, but nothing ever loves it.
Yeah,
It's a little bit of a struggle. And with kind of in the thing, we have the kind of mentality, I suppose, of path of least resistance and trying to make it not easy. It doesn't have to be easy because gardening isn't always ever so easy, but just making it enjoyable. And I think there are ways to do that by making it a comfortable, less feeling less of a chore. And I think you can do that through clever design and clever placement, use of materials, type of plants. Like was mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be vegetables. It could just be something else much more simple. So that's what we as a creative team like to think a lot about and then observe, witness, and document, and then kind of keep refining our designs to get better and better at it.
And something else I had never really thought of, like I see it every now and then when you go to a restaurant, but edible flowers. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a
Yeah, we
nice
mentioned
surprise,
that,
isn't it?
that's a mention in the book, isn't it? Yeah, those are fun for sort of decor and just fun to think about. Again, it's getting people to think, oh, listen, you can eat this. You can use it a lot of time in baking, they used. And it's again just a mindset of thinking different parts of the plant are also edible and beautiful. And but things like that really kind of get people's attention. Even though it's not going to necessarily feed you or nourish your body in a big way, it just gets people thinking that that's kind of a fun thing to try.
Yeah,
Uh,
and that's the thing when they can just be out in the garden doing something else, and then they can just pick it off like I do that with
yeah,
snow peas and all sorts of just yeah. That's
exactly.
exactly kind of what you're trying to get people to start doing and thinking about.
I think foraging is really important. Yeah. So I think just any time that we can just pick at something, our children can just pick at something as they walk around the garden and start to develop that kind of literacy around edible plants and not being afraid of things and understanding where the food comes from is just incredibly important. So then if we can install that in our landscapes, it makes it more fun and more active, taking it into more of engagement, like really getting people outdoors and really becoming more immersed in their landscapes. I think food does that hands down, probably better than anything else.
So how many people have you got designing on your team on the design side of things?
Four, yeah.
And that like have they had to sort of retrain how they think about things like incorporating the food forward principles?
Yeah, well, we've all developed that over the last decade together. So yeah, we just start with food first in every single garden, as you can probably tell. We talk about where can food go rather than doing that at the end of the project, rather than programming all the other elements. We think about that first. And it doesn't mean to say again we're putting in a huge garden. It just means like where are we catching the sunlight? Where can we grow certain plants? And just making sure that when we're positioning a swimming pool or an outdoor kitchen or a terrace that is also perhaps the space we want to put the food. That's the best opportunity for growing food successfully. And then just as a design creative team, it's then like, okay, how do we bring those two elements together? We have a swimming pool in the book with a kitchen garden next to it, and that one's always raised a few eyebrows because it's an odd place to put it, but it was the only place on this property that actually it had the best sun, had 8 hours every day, which is normally where you put a pool. And so we were just like, well, that's where the food's going to go. So we just need to design around it for it. And of course, a pool is, particularly the pool was right next to the house. So of course, that's an area of high traffic, high travel, high circulation for the people that live there and guests. And so by putting the food growing close to that, of course, you're gardening much more frequently. You're observing and seeing when the strawberries ready to harvest. It's not behind a fence 100 yards away, 100 meters away. It is up close. So you naturally learn much quicker and you also tend to eat more healthy food because it's just right there every single day. And you also tend to make it prettier. You might use obelisks, garden art, nicer joinery, nicer masonry, stone details, because it is so central and it's right in view from the kitchen window or just those main circulation areas. So that was a total success. And that's just a great example of how we kind of think about food and just the general program landscape elements.
Yeah, speaking of eating healthier, I did like that story about one of the clients where the initial idea about doing it was because she wanted to eat healthier and save money and like cook more at home.
Mhm.
And that's
That's
such a
right.
great idea because it's hard to sort of force yourself to do that, but then if you've got that, no, that's a good way to start doing it is to start growing your own and having it close to the house so you're seeing it more and easy to access.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
like
that was a tiny garden. I mean, that was really not very big at all. Property, a cottage on a little suburban lot. And Yeah, we put that little potager right next to the house. I mean, it was just right there. I mean, it's where the sun was, and it felt right. And then we just made it really pretty and usable, user friendly. It was definitely probably about thigh height, so very easy to garden. It didn't feel too strenuous, and it was quite easy to see when things were ready. And it was just pretty. And I think that they really embraced it. And that was again another kind of example of that proximity to the house and usable space. And then whenever like guests came over, and when everyone is just like blown away usually when they see it. But again, it has to be done tastefully and beautifully. I mean, if you just do some crappy beds and just make it kind of look like it becomes a bit of a mess, then of course that's not also the goal here. But a lot of gardens, the more frequent touch you have with them, they typically look better. So if you ignore them for 3 weeks, then naturally they'll become a little bit out of hand.
Yeah.
So
And then
yeah.
and then it just sort of gets overwhelming when it's too much to do.
And then you get overwhelmed, and then apathy kicks in, and then everyone says gardening's too hard. We're going to try something else. So we that's what we design against because we've seen it happen all too often, particularly with a lot of people in our profession. We go to a lot of landscapes where most of the gardens, food spaces are way in the back or on the side, normally near a tree cover because they couldn't think what else to do. And then so naturally plants don't thrive there. They get sick a lot. They don't do as well. And then everyone says gardening's really hard. It doesn't look good. And so it
Yeah.
perpetuates the belief. And so that's the concern. Or not the concern, but that's just the issue that we design just very differently for.
And do you get people who are a bit cautious about how much work would be involved in having so many edibles?
Yeah, there's a chapter actually called tending in the design guide in the book, which addresses that, where coming back to that principle of people instantly think of vegetables, but when you think outside of that, we often think of vegetables as toddlers. They need a lot of attention, little and often. Everything wants to eat them, kill them. And so you have to protect them a lot. But the advantages are great and they grow really quickly and you get these really big returns and it can be really dynamic and fun. Then you have your sort of teenagers, like your herbs and berries, that basically need a little bit more attention, but not all the time. And then you have your trees that need, like we call them the young adults. They've kind of left home, gone to uni, come back for a handout once a year at Christmas, and then off they go again. So they're usually very easy to grow, and with a single harvest season, and that's it. And so we like to get everyone, our clients, to think about that. And we ask those questions up front. How much time do you have? Who are your gardeners? Do you have gardeners? Are you the gardeners? Because we just don't want to overwhelm people because that also defeats the object of kind of stickability and longevity. That's what we're aiming for. So we just get them to think about that. And then we just design at an appropriate scale for that for them, depending on their lifestyle, the size of the family, their enthusiasm, how much energy they have, their age. We look at all of those factors.
And do you find yourself ever having to walk away from any clients because you're just not meshing together?
Oh, yes. We never really walk away. We just have a very rigorous interview process for clients. That's all. Because just for all of our sakes, really, we just, we have a mission. We're a mission-driven design company. And so we just want people to understand what that is. And if that feels in alignment with them, then we're ready to go and work together. So that's all. It just needs to be a fit. As you know, I mean, you work in the space. I don't know what some of your favorite things are to build or design, but are you able to walk away?
I literally did it yesterday to a client. So I went out there to look at their project, and like I say that about designers as well. Like not every client is right for every designer, so it's nothing personal. It's
Yeah.
just there's certain people who work well together. But yeah, this project it was extremely steep, and the access was just through a pedestrian door, and
Oof.
thought I'm not desperate for work. I don't want to have to worry about
I
this.
think that's where it comes to sometimes. Yeah, it's just your hunger or desire, or how much work you've already got on your plate too. No, that's right. That's right. That makes total sense.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like earlier in my career, I would have said yes to it because I just said yes to everything and take it all on. And they were like the people were awesome people as well. So I would just have felt too bad. So I said yes and then hated myself while we're doing the work and lost money on it as well. So yeah, it's good when you can actually learn to say no to the right people.
I feel like we probably all of us in this industry and other construction industries or design industries, I feel like that's part of the journey, right? And the growth. And we still do it from time to time. We still
Yeah.
fall back into that. But I feel that's just part of it. And then you get the one incredible client where everything aligns, the vision, the budget, the time frame, the amazing people. And then like if every single project was just like this, and typically that you get maybe one of those a year if you're lucky.
Yeah,
But it's
we're working on one of them at the moment too, and
you
it's
are.
just a dream, and then it just makes you appreciate it more when you have got other
It
clients
really
you can't.
does. I know. And you just want it all projects to be like that. But then the reality is that's not always the case. But I think if you can get one of those a year, I think that's a great result. Yeah. Where everything aligns on all the parts.
What's one of the questions you get asked the most from people who are wanting to grow, you know, food at their own place? Because I know Ashley James gets asked how to grow carrots because he's very big on carrots.
He hates carrots. I don't know what his like hatred for carrots all came from. Must be some childhood trauma. We haven't got into it yet, but I know one day we'll have a little fireside chat and drink some hot cocoa and talk about it, his feelings. But I know. Yeah, what do they ask us? I mean, honestly, I think your point earlier was well raised. I think most people are just concerned about how much time it's going to take them and who's going to be looking after it. You do need a skilled hand. If the homeowner is not going to be doing it themselves, then you need to have someone who knows how to tend. Some of the perennial species obviously are a lot easier, your fruits, berries, herbs, but certainly your annual production, it's very skillful. I don't know if in Australia you have urban farm companies popping up everywhere, but there's certainly a lot here now.
Yeah, I reckon I've
Um,
seen the name starting to show up.
yeah, I mean it's huge in the United States right now, and so there's just lots and lots of different companies popping up that are helping people to grow food, which is really important. So the more the merrier, and hopefully that will start working its way more into your culture as well.
So are they going around to people's houses to help them with stuff they've already got there?
Yeah, I mean that's what the Backyard Farm Company was, the other company that we have here, and that team. We've changed it a little bit this year, but for several years, that's what we were doing. We would come in twice a month, and then we would work, tend the vegetables, feed the soil, look after everything, but take care of pests or disease, early disease pest detection and deal with it, and then harvest. And then, our big hope was that the homeowners and the children, we work a lot with young professional families, they get involved too. And so then we'd email them, send them a list of things that they need to do in the next 2 weeks, harvesting, the beans will be ready, the squash is ready, etc. So feel free to go out there and harvest and eat from those. And so that was the symbiotic kind of relationship we have with the homeowners. We would keep it going and keep it fed, some of the more technical things. And then if people wanted to learn, they can come out and work with a team and we'll teach you. Doing a little bit less of that now, a little bit more. Because we have the online class, so we're trying to make a lot of this information available to people. They can take our class for a much lower cost than hiring us as a professional design outfit. And we just share all of our knowledge that we've learned over the years on small scale food growing. Really, the growing end, not the design end, but more about how to grow the different food and soil testing and fertility management and all of that stuff that you really need for a successful vegetable garden anyway.
Yeah, I love that idea. Like, I wonder how many people who do regular garden maintenance actually include that kind of thing as part of their service, or we
It's
probably.
very, I mean, you have to know what you're doing. It's not that easy. When I started it, 12 years ago, it's small scale intensive. It's very particular. A lot of our farm team, were former professional organic farmers, so they worked on actual, broadacre farms, or small scale farms. But so they had that background already. So then they had to kind of pare that down to a smaller scale model, and it's different. You're often in raised planters, less in ground. And there are just different requirements and needs, particularly for fertility, pest management, succession planting. So you're always harvesting something throughout the year. It's just different. It's different, but I think we've become really good at it because we've just done it for so long, and we've kind of documented our successes and failures. And as a team, that's where the course came out of. We then put all that together in the class. And some of that also, the information, of course, is in the book, but in a more kind of slimmed down version.
Yeah, but I think crop rotation is a big one as well that people often don't aren't aware
It
of.
is, and it's a lot harder in small scale, actually, where you don't say you only have two vegetable beds. It's actually a lot, and they're not terribly big. It's actually a little bit harder for some crop rotation if you just love tomatoes and you just want to grow them every year. So it can get a little tricky, but we try to if we have enough space to kind of rotate things. But sometimes is limited if you're next to a house or you have any kind of tree lined edges. Sometimes that one sunny spot that gets 8 hours is the only spot in your garden. So that's you're gonna have to grow tomatoes every year and just hope for the best. But there are ways to kind of get around that too, with good soil management. Yeah.
How'd your place looking? Because a lot like there was yeah, one of the sections was based on your garden. So is it
Yeah, that's right.
still looking healthy?
It is. I love it, actually. I really wanted a garden in the book that really lent into native landscapes and more regional plants and materials. And so that's what I built here on the hill that we live on. And so yeah, it was a really fun project. And it we were actually building this as we were writing the book, which is also another big lift. But it's really nice just to experiment with native plants, creating habitat and with adjacent food, and just experimenting more with water harvesting and soil water retention, building soil, working with less of your common kind of ornamental plants, shall we say. So that was a really great exercise, and I love it. It's just pretty wild out there, and honestly, it's so low maintenance. But you have to be into that look. I try and, there's lots of structure in the design. It was important that we had a really strong bones so that it could hold the wildness together. If everything is wild and out of whack, then it just looks chaotic. But there's something really satisfying about having that organized, ordered space with that kind of chaotic native planting that work really well together. And it's just a fun experiment, and it continues to be. So yeah, it was fun that we got to feature that in the book.
Yeah. And yeah, and it's good that you were kind of doing it at the same time. So then you're sort of getting ideas at why you can still act on them.
It's true. It was also a complete nightmare, because building your own project whilst running a book and running two companies and having 100 photo shoots, it was it was a lot, but I'm still young enough that I can handle it. But yes, I think leaning more into that. We're as a design company, our team, we're much more interested in that type of landscaping, and so it's nice that you get to do your own home and make those mistakes and errors and learn from it, and then we can then share that more refined knowledge, or the lessons we've learned with our clients.
Yep. Yeah, I just I've been in my house for a year now and I still haven't finished the garden. And I'm not writing a book or anything. Not so just
My garden probably would not have been built if I wasn't writing a book. It would still be 1950s concrete, let me tell you. So yeah, thank goodness that I had that opportunity because it may not have ever happened. So I agree. It's hard when you're doing it day in, day out.
but yes, yesterday I put some what are they called? Wildflower seeds out. So that's I'm
Did you?
starting. Yeah,
That's
I've
very,
never grown
that's
them.
very, very Ashley James, if I might say.
Well, it was actually his seed, special ones he's got his name on. So yeah,
Yeah, I figured. I figured.
but
Good.
it told me how like it blew me away how little there were. You have to spread over a bigger area. It's like 2 grams per square meter. So
Do you
it's
mix it with sand?
yeah, I did,
Do you
yeah,
mix it?
but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's going to work or not. It seems like it's very sparse. It
No, you'll be
looks
surprised. Well, you're learning from the master, right? So it'll be
yeah,
fine.
exactly, yeah, yeah. I sent him a message asking him if it's a scam and they're just trying to sell seeds and you don't get anything popping up, but it didn't get back to me, so I think it is.
Yeah. I think there's your answer. I mean, he is phenomenal at it. I love his style and how he leans into that really high kind of wild floral schemes. I think it's just beautiful and kind of dreamy, isn't it? I mean, he doesn't like that type. I mean, there are probably people that don't like it, but there's just something I think really, really special and fairly inexpensive, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
know he probably marked up the seed for you a lot, but
yeah,
for most people it would be fairly inexpensive.
yeah. But like I do like his the quality of the his kitchen garden as well, and like some of the obelisks in your book as well. Like they look pretty fancy, a lot fancier than the ones I've seen.
Of the kitchen gardens.
Yeah, I like the timber obelisks.
Oh, the obelisks. Oh, yeah, we have a couple of those cedar ones we got from Canada. Yeah, they were really, really nice, weren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Ashley does have those. Yeah. I think that the garden ornamentation is really important for kitchen gardens, just in general. I think it elevates everything and makes it a little bit more important and interesting. And of course, it's vertical support for flowers and food, so it accomplishes a lot for quite a small thing.
yeah. You can have something like it's important to have things looking good when they don't look good. So there's other, while they're
And that's the other thing, isn't it?
back.
The wind, you're still left with that structure and that garden art, which I think most of us love. So I think it's a really good addition to a kitchen garden.
So what's the plan once the book is once you've got that all sort of sold off? What's your
Yeah.
plan next? Or are you just
Um,
focused on the book at the moment?
yeah, we've been focusing on the book launch. We have a launch party next week, and then we're going to be doing probably more of a book tour in the spring before we get going with gardens over here. So that will happen, and then we just have lots of different projects going on. We're working with a really good B Corp winery at the moment on their hospitality offerings, working with their farm to table chef in Mendocino County, which is just a little bit 2 hours north of San Francisco, and it's pretty wild up there. And it was kind of the birthplace of biodynamic wine growing. So it's really cool project, and it's really fun working with chefs as part of the design process at this really old, beautiful redwood barn. So we're going to be putting a whole food program together there and design for events and things like that. So that's something we're going to be working on a lot over the winter and hopefully building it ready for when the wine season kicks off in May, June next year. So that's something that we're all really excited about here.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the chefs because I almost forgot one of my other favorite parts of the book is I think
Yeah,
the is it uh
Tyler,
Tyler
Tyler
Florence,
Florence.
yeah. He's
Yeah, that's right.
he's got a pet pig running around on his
Yeah,
property.
that's Mazzy the
Yeah.
pig. Yeah, Mazzy came, she was a COVID baby and she used to live in the house for a bit. Then she got moved up to the paddock where the goats are. And then she kind of routinely kind of like wanders back down through the garden to the house. She's enormous now. She was small for the longest time. In fact, I think when that picture was taken, she was only half size. But I know that's one of my favorite pictures in the whole book. She's a real character. But needless to say, she is not really allowed anywhere near the vegetables. She would destroy everything. But it's quite fun to have her in the book, and they're a great family to work with. And again, working with just a really incredible chef on growing food for them and their family is just a really wonderful project to have worked on for the last 7 years. So we're happy that that made it into the book.
And his garden looked phenomenal as well. There's so much to look at in there.
That was pretty full on, wasn't it? Yeah, that was an old ivy hillside we turned into a three terrace, pretty intensive kitchen garden. Yeah, so um, some of the pics in the book are like late season where it gets really wild up there, but produces tons of food. So it's always just a fun spot. And then when you're working with someone who deals with it on the other end, on the business end, or just the kind of the other end of the creativity, right? Of plating a dish or cooking with it. It's just fun just to kind of talk to them about, what they do and how they think about food and preparation and presentation and flavor. So it's just a big treat to work on those projects.
Yeah. And the last question for you, Christian, is who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
So living here in Northern California, probably my favorite designer, not that they do a tremendous amount of food, but it's just a wonderful creative is your countryman, Bernard Trainer of Grand Studio Design. Bernard lives down in south of San Francisco near Big Sur. And he's just an incredible visionary and does a wonderful work with native plant schemes, landscapes, and I just adore him and his books. He's written two kind of monographs, and incredibly generous. They list all the different plants they use, materials, the site locations, design. They're my favorite books, and he's just an incredibly kind and nice human, and just has a great vision for how we could be landscaping more intentionally. So I think that would be a great person. I would absolutely tune in for that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to ask him, so that's a good one. I'll send him a message. But yeah, so
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming on and sharing what you do. And I've absolutely loved the
welcome.
book and appreciate that. And I've going to be sending out 3 copies to people. Haven't worked out exactly how they get those copies yet, but yeah,
Very good
I
process.
reckon whoever gets it is going to love it as much as I did.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for coming on and
Thank
thank you for
you.
sharing your story.
Thanks for having me on, Joel. I appreciate it. Take care.